Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Are You Ready? Transitioning Your Intro Stats course to R with Jenine Harris and Leslie Shaw. My name is Victoria Velasquez, and I'm the Marketing Manager for Research Methods at Sage Publishing. So let me begin by introducing you to our speakers. Jenine Harris earned her doctorate in Public Health Studies and Biostatistics from St. Louis University's School of Public Health in 2008. Currently, she teaches biostatistics courses as an associate professor in the Brown School Public Health program at Washington University in St. Louis. She is an author on more than 80 peer-reviewed publications and developed and published the Odds and Ends R package available on the CRAN. She is the leader of Our Ladies St. Louis, which she co-founded with Chelsea West in 2017. Our Ladies St. Louis is a local chapter of Our Ladies Global, an organization devoted to promoting gender diversity in the R community. Her recent research interests focus on improving the quality of research in public health by using reproducible research practices throughout the research process. Her book, Statistics with R, Solving Problems Using Real-World Data, published with Sage in January of this year. Leslie Shaw received her PhD in psychology from the University of Kansas, specifically in quantitative psychology. During graduate school, she worked on a variety of projects from university class enrollment, alumni donations, community policing, and self-determination. She also taught statistical computing labs and introductory statistics in a team teaching format. After graduation, she held a postdoctoral position at the Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities, where she also taught a class each semester in the quantitative psychology program. She is now a research associate at the Yang Tan Institute on Employment and Disability in the ILR School at Cornell University. She has co-authored more than 20 articles to date, and she serves as a statistical consultant for the journal Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. She co-authored the book Statistics for People Who Think They Hate Statistics Using R that published with Sage in August of last year. This webinar will be recorded and archived for future viewing. We will be sending out a link to view it to all registrants in the coming weeks. If you have any problems with audio or viewing mode during the webinar, please use the Q&A box at the right of your screen, and one of our helpful team members will get back to you as soon as possible. At the end of the webinar, we will have some time for Q&A from attendees, so please also use the Q&A box to ask any questions to speakers throughout the webinar. Please also take note of the webinar hashtag SageTalks and feel free to ask questions or leave comments on Twitter. So to get us started, we have a quick polling question for the audience, which you should see on your screen. So if everyone can please go ahead and select their answer. What is your comfort level transitioning to R? Okay, so it looks like most people have gone ahead and voted. Thank you. So let me go ahead and pass this over to Jenine and Leslie.
Hi, everyone. This is Janine. Thank you for spending some time with us today. Leslie and I are going to tell you a little bit about our personal experience transitioning to R, what to expect when you start to transition to R, a set of things we do in our classes that encourage student buy-in and engagement, a quick demonstration on making lecture slides with R, and finally, a few tips for fun R stuff that you can add to your classes or show your students.
And
I'm going to
Janine,
start with a quick summary of.
sorry, Janine, before you
I'm sorry.
go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and share the results of the poll so everyone can see the level of comfort with
Ah,
R as we go into the presentation.
yeah, that looks similar to what I would expect my students to feel when they walked in the door on the first day of class. So great. Thanks for answering that, everybody. I will start with a quick summary of my journey from SPSS to R. I know a lot of you are SPSS users based on your registration information, and I was an SPSS user in my doctoral program. That's what they used in all my courses. So when I started teaching, I just taught an SPSS without really even looking into any other options. In 2007, right as I was starting to teach, I actually went to a conference and I learned how to use R for a particular type of statistical network modeling. This was a method that was not available in SPSS. But for some reason, I still held on to SPSS as my primary tool for teaching, even though I was using R almost exclusively in my research. I held on to SPSS for 6 years. That's that procrastinated section of the road down there at the bottom of my graphic. Over this time, I started to become aware of the increasing use of R by researchers and by businesses, and the increasing demand for R skills in the job market. It started to look like using R in my courses would really give my students an advantage when they were competing for jobs involving data. It also became a fall semester ritual for me to deal with school SPSS licenses expiring, students buying versions of SPSS that didn't have the modules we needed in class, and a handful of students every time trying to get by on a 30-day free trial of SPSS for a 15-week semester. So in 2013, I stopped procrastinating and I decided to add one single day of R to my syllabus for fall and post the syllabus for the students on Blackboard so that I could not change my mind. I highly recommend this strategy. I did this before actually having written any of the material for that teaching day. It turns out it did take me several hours, probably a full day, to transition my material from SPSS to R for that one day, but it went great. The students were really excited about learning R, and I was hooked almost instantly. No more expired licenses, no more incompatible versions, no more free trials or complaints about cost. And I was giving my students a tool that would help them on the job market. So the next summer in 2014, I rewrote my entire syllabus in R and posted that on Blackboard before having written any of the course material. And from there, I have never looked back. So I'll turn it over to Leslie and she can tell you how she made her transition.
Yeah, thanks, Janine. So my journey to using R was different from Janine's. I was introduced to R when I started grad school at the University of Kansas. Most of the methods courses in the psychology department provided examples in more than one statistical computing program. For the linear regression course, as you see on the slide, examples were provided in both SAS and R, while for factor analysis, examples were provided in M+, Lizrel, and R. So I started to play with R. In regression, I usually did my assignments in SAS, which is what I walked into school with, but I would try out the R syntax. I wanted to know what R could do as compared to SAS or other programs. And I also wanted to see if I could feel more comfortable with R than with anything else. In my second year of grad school, I accepted a graduate teaching position for linear regression, a course that heavily used SAS with SAS syntax, output, and figures. Previous teaching assistants had added R examples to the lab files, but lab was still taught in SAS. It was only the adventurous student who would make the leap into R. So to build my R skills, I decided to add R to all of the lab material so that it was offered and taught in both SAS and R. With my comfort in SAS, the availability of R syntax examples, and keeping 1 week ahead of the class, I was able to build my R skills week by week. So, and now I'll turn it back to Jenine.
Thanks, Leslie. When we looked at who was registered, it seemed like most people on the list were already teaching statistics. So if you've already been teaching a statistics course and you're thinking of changing to R rather than starting from scratch with R, you've already done most of the hard work. You're about 80% of the way up the mountain. I know it feels better to be on the very top, but you're almost there. When you move your course to R, your course topics will stay the same. The statistical theory and its applications will stay the same. You can use the same examples. R can open most, if not all, different types of data files, so the data you use can stay the same, and your teaching style and preferences can stay the same. So what's really changing if you decide to make this transition to R is just the software that you use anytime you take in class or working with students to teach the software, and then any software specific books or materials. So those are the things to think about when you consider making this change. Think about any software specific instruction you do in your class and any software specific books or materials you use. So the steepness of climbing that last 20% of the course development mountain, which, you know, one of the more interesting mountains in the world, right? Will depend a little bit on what software you're coming from and how you use it. So some software is more menu driven, other is more syntax driven. And Leslie's going to talk a little bit about what to expect during that transition next.
Yeah, so what can you expect? And when we were talking about it, Jenine and I, it kept on coming back to time. The time to transition the course, the learning curve, and building your confidence and comfort. So for transition time, you know, just like anything you learned in graduate school, R takes time to learn. You may have felt like you picked up SPSS in a week, but it probably took you weeks or more to understand what you were asking for and to really understand the results that SPSS would return. If you learned SAS or Stata, the time to pick up R should be similar or shorter because you'll be familiar with writing syntax. If you already know R but have never taught students to use it, you'll be figuring out the best way to introduce your students to R. This time you would take introducing them to another program is just replaced with R in your introduction piece of the course. So learning curve, you know, what are you doing when you're transitioning a course to R? If you're learning R at the same time, you're really climbing that learning curve. And this learning curve is the main reason you need time. If you're accustomed to working with a graphical user interface, shifting to writing syntax will take time, and there's no way to get around it. You need time to translate that graphical user interface to strings of text, learn how to read help files, make mistakes, fix mistakes, and continually build your skills. And as you take your time to transition your course and climb that learning curve, you're also building your confidence. None of us wants to lack confidence in front of a class, and shifting from another program to R can leave some people feeling anything but confident. If you don't have confidence because you haven't taken the time, it will be tempting to drop the effort and return to the familiar. But with mastering that learning curve, you will build confidence, the confidence that you can both teach in R while supporting your students to learn with R. So I'm going to now turn it back over to Jenine, who's going to start talking about encouraging student buy-in.
All right, so in addition to that time it might take you, depending on where you are in learning R and what the current software is that you use in your course, in addition to taking that time to switch over your materials, every semester you'll probably have a few students who walk in the door being skeptical about R for a number of reasons. For this, I usually spend a few minutes on day one of class talking about the benefits specifically for students of using R. And these benefits tend to fall into three different categories. First, R is accessible. R is a free open source software. If you've seen that acronym FOSS places, that's what it stands for. This means that the free version of R is the full version of R. Anyone with a working computer and internet access can download and use the full version of R at no cost. For students, this means a couple of things. The software selection creates no additional financial barrier to fully participating in your class. And whether they go to work for a tiny nonprofit with no software budget in a resource-poor community, or whether they go to work for Google, they will be able to use the same R skills they are learning from you in your class. And if your students are social justice focused, this is one place to point out that R is exceptional in this way. It's accessible to everyone. And on top of that, the R community is one of the most diverse and inclusive I've ever experienced. It's honestly been one of the joys of my career to become a part of the R community over the last few years. The second feature of R that benefits your students is compatibility. R is compatible with the most widely used operating systems. This is great for students and faculty. As long as the R user has computer and access to the internet, they are able to download and use R regardless of their operating system. And no matter what kind of a system a student's future employer has, they'll be able to use R with it. Finally, third, they're employable. As of 2019, R was mentioned in more data science job ads than the other top statistical software programs, SAS, SPSS, and Stata. SAS is the closest competitor, but was only in about 8,000 job ads compared to the nearly 14,000 for R during the same time period last year. So your students will benefit from your use of R by being qualified for more data-related jobs. Leslie has a few more thoughts on encouraging student buy-in for you.
Yeah, thanks, Jenine. So in addition to what Jenine shared about how R is accessible, cross-platform compatible while preparing your students for life after college, there's also the ability of R to produce high-quality graphics, create reproducible processes, as well as having that great online community. So graphics are a great way to engage students in statistics, and with R, it is really easy to create high-quality graphics for homework assignments, publications, presentations, and course materials. Graphics can be exported in a number of different formats like bitmap, JPEG, PNG, TIFF, PDF, and metafiles. And the metafile format can be copied directly into Microsoft Office products. For reproducibility, we are already being asked to make data sets and the syntax files available so that someone else can reproduce our results. With R, you can easily start with the original data set, clean the data, create new variables, run your analyses, and output graphics and tables. With all of these tasks built into a single file or a series of syntax files. What if you finished your analysis and realized you needed to recode a variable and add a predictor to your model? You don't need to retype all of those commands one by one or re-enter them in your graphical user interface. You don't need to find the correct version of your modified data set. You just need to make those changes in the syntax file, rerun all the code, and it's done. On this last piece, We're going to talk about the online community briefly, but we'll also talk more about that towards the end of the webinar. And one of the largest benefits of R is the online community. Most any question you will ask as a newcomer to R, or your student will ask, it's already been answered, probably multiple times. And many of those answers will come with an explanation so you can make sense of the answer. If one person's explanation is still not making sense, keep reading. You will find someone who provides the answer and explains what is going on in a way that makes sense to you. We will tell you more about these resources towards the end of the webinar. And so now we're going to actually shift over to talking about some strategies for engaging students. One of the first strategies of engaging students in R and bringing them up to speed is the use of screenshots in your course materials. Use screenshots more than you think you need to. Trust us, it's necessary, at least in the beginning. You'll be able to back off of the screenshots once students start to gain experience and comfort with R. Along with the screenshots, you will need to provide all of the R code for the first few weeks. As I think about how I write R syntax, I rarely start from scratch. I make a copy of an R syntax file from a similar project, modify it to the point of my new data set, change the variable names as needed, and start making other minor changes. You will have some students who fall in love with R and want to be able to write syntax from scratch, but most people take examples and replace data sets, variable names, and other details as needed. Why not use syntax that you know works? By providing all the syntax and gradually asking students to fill in the blanks and write their own code, you are providing the needed scaffolds for their learning. The next piece is the first assignment that you're going to be giving them, and we recommend make it a graphic. Make it something visual for their first coding assignment. This could be a histogram or a scatter plot, both very easy to create. Students can easily compare what they create with an example you have provided. They can also compare what they create with their peers. Add some fun by asking them to personalize the graphic. Add colors, change the axis labels, insert a title, all easy additions that lets them express their creativity. From the start, have students trade and review other people's codes. You can do this anonymously through a course management system or more informally as students work in small groups together. Through this exchange, they will learn how to format the syntax so it is easier for themselves and others and you to read. And by reviewing syntax their peers write, they will see that there is usually more than one way to get an answer from R. For this last strategy, I'm actually going to turn it over to Jenine, as this is something that she has incorporated in her courses.
Yeah, thanks. So usually I have a handful of very super motivated students who just they take to R really quickly. They want to do more and learn more. So in my class, every time I have an assignment, which is usually weekly, I have two versions. And I call them a coder version and a hacker version. They are worth the same number of points or the same percentage of your grade when you turn them in, but they're slightly different. So the coder version covers the material for the week. The hacker version covers the same material and then adds a little extra work beyond what we did in class. Usually it's something graphic or having a table rather than just explaining in a paragraph. Something that requires a little bit more R code for students to figure out. I'd say at least 10%, maybe up to 20% of my students do the hacker version pretty regularly throughout the semester. So that's been a really nice addition to my class in the last few years. So now I just wanted to do a little bit about the actual process of making this transition. So you might remember from the first slide that I shared with you, the first year I used R in class, I used it for one single day of class. So this little flow chart is sort of how I got started with that one single day of class. So the one day I chose was toward the end of the semester, and it was a data management day on recoding variables and examining missing data. I started by getting out my SPSS slides and the data set that I typically used, and then I just started Googling. How do I get this type of SPSS data file to open in R? How is it going to look to the students once I get it into R? What are the differences in how SPSS and R handles recoding and examining missing data? Once I had figured it out for myself and I thought I knew the steps pretty well, and I had it working in R, I edited my slides to show the R instructions rather than the SPSS instructions. So I didn't really change any of the content of the day, just the technical instructions for how to do it in the software. I moved on to the next slide on how to recode categorical variable into fewer categories and did the same thing. I Googled it, tried it myself, and edited my slide to show R instead of SPSS, and so on. As I figured out how to do each thing, I replaced the information on my slides, on my PowerPoint slides, with the information for doing the same thing in R. And that was it for the first year. Other than some hours of my time to switch the slides over and make sure that I knew what I was doing, that confidence issue that Leslie talked about, there was very little risk. The software was free, and I chose a topic that I could revisit in case there were some catastrophe, but no catastrophe happened. The students loved it, I loved it, and like I said earlier on, over the next summer I used the same process shown on this slide for the rest of my course. Since R can open most data files, I continued to use all the data and all the activities I've been using. Statistical theory didn't change. It was just the technical instructions that really needed adapting. I won't say everything always went perfect or is always perfect making this transition. Open source software can be quirky and can definitely present you with some challenges, but this usually ends up being a learning experience, and honestly is no different from the challenges I faced with SPSS, and I would imagine other people face when they use different software. So now I'm going to do just a brief demonstration for you. In addition to the actual teaching of the skills to your students, R can be used to help you develop your course materials. And Leslie and I thought it might be good to show you that you can make slides for class directly in R in the same place you're writing code and reviewing output with your students. So one of the features of R that for me has made teaching in R actually easier to prepare for than it was in SPSS. In SPSS, when I wanted to change a slide for class, I would have to open SPSS, do whatever it was that I needed to do, take a screenshot or several screenshots of the work, and copy and paste those into my PowerPoint slides. In addition to taking a bunch of time, anything with that many steps is going to leave some room for error. So that's that reproducibility bit that Leslie touched on earlier. In R, you can make slides or notes packets for your class directly in R itself using a file type called R Markdown, which is freely available as one of the file types in the RStudio interface for R. Since we have a pretty short time today, I'm going to switch over to RStudio and show you what this type of file looks like, and then what the slides look like that the file makes. I'm not going to provide a ton of detail about what is in the demo file, but if you want to try it for yourself, the link to all the files you would need and a set of instructions are at the web address that you see on the screen right now. And I think that someone at Sage might add that link to the chat for those of you who want to give that a try. So there you go. It's that link on the GitHub at the bottom. All right, now I'm going to switch over to RStudio so that you can see what it looks like here. All right, you should be seeing an RStudio interface. So this is the interface that you and your students will have to use R. R is running behind the scenes here. Most textbooks that you choose for teaching in R will have introductions to all the different features of RStudio. You can see there's a lot going on. So if this is your first time seeing RStudio, don't worry, it gets easier to look at as you go. R is actually running down in the pane in the lower left corner. And you can see at the top of that pane, it says R version 4.0.0. So that's where you can tell that R is running. In the bottom right-hand corner is where you would see graphs come up, where you can access the help documentation for R, where you would see what files you currently have available to you, and a number of other things. The R Markdown file that I talked about for making slides is what you're seeing in the upper left-hand corner. And I'm just going to point out a few features so that when I turn this into slides, you will notice a few things. So we won't go through everything here because that would take another couple hours, and we don't have that much time. So this is an R Markdown file, and R Markdown files can handle code, and they can handle regular text. They have options for formatting, and when you run all the code, they'll also show you output right in the file. So it's going to be a place where you can combine your code with your output with any notes that you want your students to have. Right here you see I've created, the title of this is Class 2. Maybe this is the second day of your class. Ways to access data in R. My name is right there. And then here's my first slide. I started with a couple hashtags to indicate this is a new slide, the title of the slide, and this is the content of the slide, just a little bulleted list. The second slide is use a built-in data source. It starts with a couple hashtags, etc. If you scroll down, you can see gray shading where the code is, and anything that's not in gray shading is just regular text. If I scroll down a little bit, you can see the names of some slides are like make a graph, import a local data set saved on your computer. So it's got a whole bunch of different slides here. Once you have a file like this created, you just come up here and you hit this button called knit. I don't know if you can see my pointer, maybe not, but there's a button at the very top of that upper left-hand corner screen that says knit, and it's got a little ball of yarn next to it. And you can hit that and all the code will run and it will generate a file of slides for you. I'm not going to knit it right now just because it takes 30 seconds or so to run. But just like a TV chef where they put the cake batter in the oven and 2 seconds later pull out a cake, I am going to show you the slides. So if I were to hit that knit button, this is what I would end up seeing. And you'll notice that here's my title that you saw at the very top of that file and my name. It's got a little table of contents that you can take a look at that shows you all your slides. And then you can just scroll through it as a regular set of slides for your course. On this slide, you can see there's the code, and below it is the output from the code having been run by R as it generated this file. Here's some more code. You can integrate graphs. There's one graph, and this is a graph of what software everyone on the line today is using. Here's some more output. Here's make a fancy graph, and there's your fancy graph. And some more graphs. So I just wanted to give you a little taste of what it might be like to create slides directly in R. Some of the nice things here are if you switch a data set, you can just put the name of the new data set in and change variable names if need be and rerun, and you'll have the slides created with the new data set. You won't have to worry about missing something with your cutting and pasting from one software into the slides. So there you go. So that demo is available for you if you want to play around with it. It is available for you at this GitHub address at the bottom of the PowerPoint slide that's up right now. And I will turn it over to Leslie.
Thanks for that demo, Jenine. So earlier in the webinar, we were talking about the advantages of R, and we talked about the online resources and the online community. And I found that one great place to start is the website for RStudio itself. And the window that is on the left that has the title Getting Help with R, that was an article actually from the RStudio website, where they have in this short article links to online learning pages, webinars, and cheat sheets, just to name a few. The next place that I use frequently, daily, is my favorite search engine. So go to your favorite search engine, type in your question. To make sure I'm getting the response for R, I will type R and then my question. Once you type your question in the search engine, you'll probably get hundreds of thousands or millions of links. More often than not, your first page of search results will show your question on Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow is a website with a section open to the public in which people ask questions and others answer. I typed in the question, R, how do I import a CSV file with CSV for a file with comma separated values? And my search engine returned 21.5 million results. So what I'm showing you here on the bottom right from Stack Overflow was on the first page of my results. If you click on the link, you'll see the original post with multiple answers, usually with a check mark next to the answer that was judged to be the best. And so I'm not going to pass it back to Jenine one more time, who's going to talk about more online resources.
All right, it helps if I turn my microphone back on. I can't say enough about getting on Twitter and liking and retweeting and commenting and following our stuff that you find interesting. So I was never much of a Twitter user myself until I started going on Twitter just to find stuff about R. And I've added a few of my favorite things that I would recommend being the first things you follow. And then from those, you'll start to see posts by people that are doing things that you find interesting or useful, and you can follow them as well. So Our Ladies is something to follow. There's an Our Ladies Global Twitter feed. There's also Our Ladies chapters in lots of cities. So you might even look for an Our Ladies chapter in your city to follow. RStudio is great to follow on Twitter. MIR is a new group that's minority R for underrepresented R users. And the Africa R accounts are getting pretty useful these days. More and more stuff on there to look at. Let's see, Tidy Tuesday. So Tidy Tuesday is a weekly social data project in R, and you can check out the Tidy Tuesday hashtag for links to that project. Basically, they post a data set every week, and everybody who wants to can access that data set and make a data visualization and then post their data visualization. So you end up with all of these different visualizations of a single social data project that you can look through, and that's great for students as well. If you have those students that are highly motivated to learn more R, getting them involved in Tidy Tuesday is a great way to go. And then finally, I'll just mention the R bloggers website. That is a great place to go to find tutorials and tips on lots of topics. So you can go to the R bloggers webpage, and there will be a search bar if you're looking to make a bar graph, or if you're looking to conduct a logistic regression, you can just type it in the search engine there and you'll find lots of tips on how to do it. All right, and then as promised, a little bit of fun. I know we all have different teaching styles and personalities, but I really believe you can't underestimate the value of adding some fun into your statistics classes. And R makes this part of teaching so easy. The R culture is just naturally fun. For example, there's this graph you see on the left that looks like Legos is a graph feature available to you in the R function BrickR, created by Ryan Timpey, who did a great presentation on it last year at the R Studio conference, if you're interested in it. Somebody created a Wes Anderson color palette package for R. So if you're creating graphs and you're a fan of Wes Anderson movies, you can make your graphs look like Wes Anderson movies. There's also a US News and World Report package, I believe, to make your graphs look like the US News graphs. The teacup giraffes is adorable. And this is a set of really great tutorials just for getting started in using R. They're interactive and they've got these little giraffes that are teaching you things. It's really cute. And then finally, there's the hex stickers, which you see over on the right-hand side. Most of the R functions and programs have a hex sticker with them, and people will collect these and cover their laptops with them. So it's not unusual to see someone's laptop completely covered in hex stickers at a conference or a meeting. Our studio used to send out hex stickers to people who are teaching. I haven't asked for any in a while, so I can't guarantee it, but you might try emailing our studio if you want them to send you some stickers for your class. And then finally, there are free meetups of people all over the world learning and teaching R. With the current global situation, a lot of them are online right now. So you could learn R from people all over the world by just going to Meetup and checking out what's available. And you'll see in those meetups, you'll usually see a lot more examples of the different kinds of fun things that you can add to your R work in class. So much of what we teach and use statistics for is really serious, and rightly so, but mixing in some fun can boost the enthusiasm and motivation of your students. And at least from my experience, make the classroom culture more conducive to learning. So I think that's it for me and Leslie. We'll turn it back over to Vicki at Sage, and I think she may have some of your questions for us.
Yes, thank you, Jenine. And I also want to note a couple of additional resources that include the books by both of our speakers today. So Janine's book, Statistics with R, Solving Problems Using Real-World Data, and Leslie's book, Statistics for People Who Think They Hate Statistics Using R. And you can find out more information on both books on sagepub.com. And I'll also be following up with an email to all attendees, so you will also be able to reach out to me for more information. So thank you both for that great presentation. We'll spend some time going through the questions now. And I first want to know, a few questions came through about the recording and the slides. So yes, they will be shared with everyone after the presentation. The recording will also be available on the Sage Talks website within the next week or so. And I also want to note that I did copy that demo link into the chat for the audience, so you should be able to access it there. And I'll also make sure to include that in my follow-up email. So the first question is for Jenine. At the beginning of the presentation, you were talking about your syllabi that you created with R, and someone asked if you would be willing to share that syllabi.
Sure, I'm actually working on my class for this fall right now, so it will be updated within the next month or so, and I would be happy to share that It will be posted on my GitHub account or I can send it to Sage and they can share it with the participants.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
Or feel free to find me on Twitter.
Yes, that's a great resource. Thank you. Okay, the next question, how did other faculty respond who may use SPSS and expect students to know SPSS, data sets already in SPSS, but students are being taught using R and then have less knowledge with SPSS, for example? Most faculty in my college use SPSS. Only 1 to 2 use R or syntax-based programs. Leslie, if you want to start off.
Sure. At the University of Kansas, it was very much a mixed bag. What software you learned really depended on which department you ended up taking statistics courses in. At that point, our introductory statistics course was taught in SPSS, but if students moved on to the very next course, they transitioned to R at that point. And I think I tried to emphasize that it is really, R is just a tool to teach statistics, and statistics is really what it's all about. And I think if you have a student comfortable with R and understanding what they're doing, generating statistical output using R, it's really not that hard for them to also pick up SPSS. Jenine, do you have any thoughts about how it might differ at Washington University?
We have had this conversation so many times in my department on whether we should all be on the same software or whether we should give the students experience in multiple software packages. And we've landed until now, or still, on the side of students being exposed to more software packages. And so our faculty have the choice to choose what they want to teach in. And we have people teaching in SPSS, R, SAS, and Stata. And that does mean that for each of us, when a student enters our class, we cannot be certain that they have had experience with the software we're teaching. And so for me, what that's meant is providing my students with some tutorials, maybe before class even starts for the semester, or at least listing them on the syllabus that get them up to speed in using the software if it's not an introductory course. I will be honest, I don't know what my colleagues using SPSS and SAS do, but I would imagine it's something similar, giving the students a few resources to get up to date on the software package before class begins or on their own time if they're not familiar yet.
Great, thank you. And the next question is, what is the website address for a secure download of R? Jenine, if you have that handy, I can post it into the chat to everyone, or I can definitely include that in my follow-up email.
It's actually one of the bullet points in the demo. So if they go to the URL for the demo, let me go back in the slides so you can see that. If you go to the URL on the bottom of the slide, the second or third bullet has the direct link to download R. And then the bullet after that has the direct link to download RStudio.
Okay, perfect. And I did copy that link into the chat for the entire audience, so you should all be able to click on that and access that link. Our next question. I made the transition last spring and student resistance was my biggest barrier. It seemed to be just a few students, but then it turned into a group think. However, it ended up being the only stats program they could access when we went online during the pandemic. But it was still super hard. So any buy-in tips would be super helpful. And Jenine, believe it was you that covered this. One of the slides in the presentation was on student buy-in tips. And if you have anything to add.
Sure. So I go over this on the very first day of class. I am teaching in a public health program. So one of the biggest buy-in tips that seems to resonate with my students is the social justice angle. Because R is accessible to everyone all over the world and is free and available to everyone at no cost. That means everyone has a level playing field learning and using statistics in R. So that's one of my main points. I would also, you could get the jobs data pretty easily to show that there were nearly twice as many data science jobs last year posted as jobs data science in SAS. So twice as many in R as there were in SAS, which was the next closest competitor. The other thing I guess would just be including some fun and letting them have a few really quick wins right at the beginning. So giving them some code that makes a nice graph on a topic that's interesting to your students on day 1 or day 2, I would highly recommend. I'm happy to have other conversations about this offline as well. I may not have had as much pushback as some other folks, so there might be other people with great ideas out there.
Great, thank you. Next question is, someone's asking if you could describe the types of students in your classes. Is it a general education intro class with majors from across all colleges? Leslie, if you want to go ahead and answer that first.
Sure. In the psychology department, we actually had a lot more than just psychology students, people who were majoring or even minoring. We drew students from across the university for a variety of reasons, and even same with our graduate level courses. And in their department, they would have used data or SPSS, but would respond to being asked to use R. I think, like Jenine said, not assuming any background when the student walks into the course and having those supportive example files really helps any student who walks into your classroom. How about your program, Jenine?
Yeah, my program is entirely graduate students, and they are from mostly from public health, some from social work, and I do have the occasional medical school student or business school student or someone from political science, but I would say I've only had maybe 1 or 2 undergraduate students in the 10 years I've been teaching in this program. So it's mostly first semester graduate students in one of the social sciences with a few exceptions.
Great, thank you. Next question is, do you have students work in R script or R Markdown, and why? Jenine, if you want to answer that first.
Sure. So when I first started teaching in R, it was all R script, and then I've morphed over the years to doing the majority of it in R Markdown. I still do one day, I think, in R script at the very beginning, just to introduce them to kind of the R, just the basic product, but mostly in R Markdown. And this is because it's just, you can integrate the code with the output, with the text that they want to write around it, so they can create an entire assignment in one Markdown document, and everything will be there. Their answers to questions, their code, and their output. And so it's just, it's a nice holistic way to do it, rather than asking them to do stuff in the software and then copy and paste it into a separate document. I guess that's probably why I use it, just because it feels like it's going to be more useful in that way for the students. Leslie, how about you?
I pretty much, I used R Markdown for creating my materials for presentations, but just asked the students to work in the R script files. I didn't make that leap that you did, Jenine, but I can really see the benefits of introducing them to R Markdown as well.
Thank you. Next question. What resources do you provide to help students install R, RStudio, and packages? And Leslie, if you want to answer that first, please.
Sure. So I'll actually start talking about my book, the book that I wrote with Neil Salkind. In chapter 2, I introduce the student to plain old R and start introducing them to the vocabulary. There's instructions on how to install it, how to open it up, run their first command, see the output, and they can start to learn to navigate and learn the language. And then there's a follow-up chapter just on RStudio, because for me, I work in the Windows environment. You can probably see that Jenine works in the on the Macintosh environment or on the cloud. I know she does the cloud work. But I found the RStudio is a great way to see your history, see your file system and graphics, see your syntax and output all together in that one interface. And so in my chapter 3, I walk them through installing, and then I walk them through the menus, tell them exactly what they are seeing in that initial RStudio environment and how to work in it. How about you, Jenine?
Sorry, I'm having a little trouble unmuting my microphone. Yeah, so I use almost exclusively RStudio with our Markdown files in class. I do a day of script in the beginning. I'm not sure if I am remembering the question correctly.
It was, what resources do you provide to help students install R, RStudio, and packages?
Yeah, I was still on the last question. I actually send a document to all of my enrolled students before the semester begins that includes the links to the websites where R and RStudio are available, and some instructions, just like on that GitHub repository, if any of you go to get the demo, some instructions like that for downloading both, and then for typing their first command and running it and seeing what the output is. So I try to encourage gently, and then a little less gently, that they do that well before the first day of class, so that we don't have a lot of technical issues trying to get up and running actually during class time.
Great, thank you. And just a note that we do have several more questions we won't have time for today, but our speakers have agreed to answer the questions offline, and I will be sure to share the responses in my follow-up email. So just for our last question, do you recommend starting with R Commander because it is so much like SPSS? And Jenine, if you want to start off.
I have not used R Commander, so I'm probably not going to be any help here. Sorry.
Yeah, this is Leslie, and I haven't used it either.
Okay. No problem.
Can I just say really quick, if y'all have questions, and you can want to find me on Twitter, I'm at Jenine Harris. So you're welcome to ask me there.
Perfect. And like I said, we'll be sure to compile the remaining questions and just send them around to all the participants afterwards. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and a special thank you to our speakers. Like I said, in the coming weeks, look out for the email that includes a link to the webinar recording and the answers to some of the questions we didn't have time for today. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.